anticipation. And the kids that don't know this song, they need to learn it. And all the grown-ups, I know you know it. It's called a Crawdad song. Now you get a line, I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line and I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line and I'll get a pole. You go down to the Crawdad hole, honey. Baby mine, can you kids sing that? You get a line and I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line, I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line and I'll get a pole. You go down to the Crawdad hole, honey. Baby mine. Let me get rid of this pick. Sorry about that. I left my thumb pick on the mountain. Now wake up, Sal, slept too late, honey. Wake up, Sal, slept too late, babe. Wake up, Sal, you slept too late. Crawdad man done passed your gate, honey. Baby mine. Now you get a line and I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line and I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line and I'll get a pole. We'll go down to the Crawdad hole, honey. Baby mine. Now what you gonna do when the creek runs dry, honey? What you gonna do when the creek runs dry, babe? What you gonna do when the creek runs dry? Sit on the bank, watch the crawdad die, honey. Baby mine. Now you get a line, I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line, I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line and I'll get a pole. We'll go down to the crawdad hole, honey. Baby mine. First of all, let me tell you, I come from a huge family. I have 10 brothers and 4 sisters. There's 15 of us kids, and just so happened that I was a middle child. There was 5 boys and 2 girls older than me, and 5 boys and 2 girls younger than me. But when there's clothes to be given away and passed around, I missed it going up and coming down because there was a girl on each side of me. Oh, I'm telling you. I liked the way I grew up. We didn't have any electricity, it didn't have any water in the house. And we growed everything we eat, and it was fun. My grandfather, he used to come down and he'd tell us stories. He'd sing us songs. He'd tell me the biggest lies you ever heard in your life. One day he was down there and I was about 5 years old. If you come out the back door of our house sat on a hill. 4 rooms upstairs, 50-foot square house, downstairs, 16-foot wide and 50-foot long, that was our kitchen. And if you come out our back door and turn to the left, about 30 yards down the path there is a spring down there. We didn't have inside water, and Mom had a spring box. She kept milk and butter in it. And if you ain't ever had a whooping for stealing cold milk, it's worth it. Let me tell you. But if you come out our back door and you turn to the right about 35, 40 yards down that little old path, that was our bathroom down there. We had a 2-seater. That's the way our property is set up. My grandpa come down there and he's sitting out there on the back porch one morning smoking his pipe. And I was about 5 years old, and out that back door I went down that path towards that spring and run into a spider web big as a number 3 wash tub. Right in the middle of it was a big old black and yellow striped spider. You know, looked like it wrote something in its web. I'd heard Dad and Grandpa talk about spiders. They bite you, they rot your fingers off if you don't get something done about it, you know. Well, I was scared of that big old spider. Well, I run back to the back porch and I told my Grandpa, "Grandpa, you ought to see what's down here in the spring pipe." He said, "Well, what's it look like, Rook?" That man called me Rook all his life. I never did figure that out. My name was Charles. He said, "Well, what's it look like, Rook?" I said, "Grandpa, it's a big old black and yellow striped spider. It looks like it's wrote something in his web." And he looked me right square in the eye and sucked them lips over them teeth. He said, "Oh no, Ruth." I said, "What's wrong, Grandpa?" He said, "That's the right, Spider. If it sees your teeth, boy, it'll write your name in its web and you'll die." I said, "I won't do it." He said, "Yeah, you will too." I heard Mom and Dad up on the front porch. So up around the house I went. "Dad, you know what Grandpa just told me?" He said, "Ain't no telling what Pop told you, boy." I said, "Dad, there's a big old black and yellow striped spider down there in the spring place." I didn't get no further than that. My dad said, "Oh no. You didn't see your teeth, did it?" I said, "Dad," he said, "it sees your teeth, boy, you're a goner. You better leave them spiders alone." I was 5 years old. I believed it. Them little old spiders, they be hanging there not bothering nothing to nobody, and here come that little wild kid, lips sucked in over his teeth, about blow them out of their webs, you know, aggravate them to death. Wasn't very long ago, I found out they pulling my leg. That didn't make no difference. Them other kids coming up after me, I just passed it right down on to it. Better watch out for them rotten spiders. You know, and things were clicking along there, and Dad, he'd hire us out. And we'd go pick beans, we'd pick peas, corn that had been drugged down with a mule wagon, we'd jerk it off the stalks and throw it up in the wagon. And when we got through working, we'd get paid in what we was working in. Like a bushel of beans or a sack of corn. Now I can see that's all right. But at that time in my life, I was wanting some money. I never had any money. I knowed what to do with it, but I just didn't have any. And my two oldest brothers, they went into Knoxville, Tennessee, and they got them a job on the Forest Avenue Market, unloading produce. One day they was unloading this boxcar full of bananas, and they found this spider. Not no ordinary spider either, big as a teacup, a big black and yellow striped banana tarantula. They thought that fuzzy thing was pretty. They brought it home. Well, now that house we lived in, it was a half log house and a half clapboard house. Sometime a chinking would fall out of the logs, you know. Sometimes you could see outside. Sometimes you could sling a cat through some of them cracks that's in that wall. That wasn't no place to keep a spider. Why, it'd just walk away. But there's one place on your property that's airtight, guaranteed. Go out there about 5:30 one November morning, and the next morning it'll be airtight. That's the outhouse. That's where they put that spider, because it couldn't get away. Now, my dad, he was a creature of habit if there ever was one. Every day, he'd slide that car in there and get out, and go through the house and downstairs, say hey to Mom, and go out on the back porch and pour him up a pan full of water and wash up. He wore bib jeans. Kept a can of Prince Albert right there in the front. And he'd lean up against the porch post, he'd get out that old PA and he'd roll himself up a smoke. And he'd lean back against that post and he'd smoke until Mom got supper ready. Well, she'd holler at us and we all go to the table at the same time. And Dad, he'd say the blessing. We sat down to eat. He never did get settled in his seat real good until he was getting up. He ate faster than any man I ever known in my life. I've thought about that a whole lot. I think maybe he was going to get his first before them 15 kids fell into it, you know. But then he'd get up and he'd go back out there on the back porch and he'd lean up against that post and he'd build himself up another smoke. And then he'd wander off down that path to that little building down there. Every night's business he done that. We was all sitting there eating, and we heard, "Wow!" And man, he come running back in that back door, holding them britches up like this, as galaxies are flapping out in the back. Went over to an old shift robe that Mom had in the corner of the kitchen and got out the gun. And my mama said, "Oh, look, I wished them never. What in the world are you doing? You're scaring these kids to death. Get out of the way, Lois." He rummaged around there in the drawer and come out with an old green shotgun shell, looked like it had grease on it, about an inch of brass. Bloop, in the gun. Out the door he went. And there sat us kids at that table, all 15 of us. Down there on that creek in the 40s, if somebody run out of the house with a loaded gun, I found death, followed instantly. And we heard, boom! Well, in a little while, Dad come back in. He walked over there and he put the gun up. My mama said, I'll swan, Olaf, you scared these kids to death, and me too. What in the world have you shot? And he started to brush by her, and she said, Olaf, what did you shoot? He turned around there and looked at all us kids sat at that table, and he turned around and looked at my mom. And he sucked them lips in over them teeth. He said, Lord, I tell you what, that was the biggest rotten feller out there in that outhouse, Lord, you ever did see in your life. I was scared to kill it, so I shot it. Olaf, you didn't shoot a spider. Lord, that thing was so big, it wrote every one of them kids' name in its web. They all died, Lord, if I had to shoot that thing. There's been a many a night that I've sat there at that kitchen table, fourth man down on the right-hand side against the wall from my dad. I've looked him in the eye so many times, but I never could get up the courage to say, hey, Dad, you shot any rotten spiders lately, you know, but since I was 14, before I found out, wait a minute, it wasn't a cuss word, I knew I wasn't going to say that to Dad. That's a true story.
Bring up the chair.
There was a mountain couple found a little baby cub bear. That little feller had a sore foot, so they pinned him up in the corn crib. Started doctoring his foot and feeding that little feller. Well, he'd get so much food he didn't want to leave. He just hung around there. And when he walked, he drug his sore foot. And they called him Slewfoot. Well, this is a little song about Slewfoot. After he gained 400 pounds, and become a pest instead of a pet. And it goes about like this. High on the mountain, tell me, what do you see? Bear track, looking back at me. Hurry and get a rifle before it's too late. The bear's got a little pig and headed for the gate. He's big around the middle and he's broad across the rump. Running 30 miles an hour, taking 90 feet a jump. Never been caught, ain't never been treed. Some folks, they looked a lot like me. Saved up my money and I bought me some bees. Started making honey way up in the tree. Cut down the tree, all the honey, it was gone. Looks like Slewfoot's been here and gone. He's big around the middle and he's broad across the rump. Running 90 miles an hour, making 30 feet a jump. Ain't never been caught, ain't never been treed. Some folks say looks a lot like me. Winter's coming on and it's 40 below. The river's froze over, so where can he go? We'll chase him up the gully and we'll trap him at the well. Kick him in his bottom just to listen to him yell. He's big around the middle and he's broad across the rump. Running 90 miles an hour, taking 30 feet a jump. Ain't never been caught, ain't never been treed. Some folks say he looks a lot like me. Some folks say he looks a lot like me. Slewfoot. This little song might give you more of incentive to lock your windows. Once there was a burglar man, went to rob a house, slipped into the window as quietly as a mouse, thinking everything that he would get is under the bed he lay. That burglar man saw us out that night and made his hair turn gray. About 9 o'clock, an old maid came in. I'm so tired, she said, thinking everything gonna be alright. She forgot to look under the bed. Well, she took out her teeth, a big glass eye. The hair came off her head, and the burglar man had a big old fit. He crawled from under the bed. she drew a pistol from the drawer. To this burglar said, young man, if you don't marry me, I'm gonna blow off the top of your head. He looked at her teeth, a big glass eye. He had no place to scoot. Turned to the old maid standing there and said, woman, for God's sake, shoot. Now the burglar man, he's dead, I'm sure. I don't know where he's gone. Up above or down below, I'm now through singing this song. You're curing me. Jack had always been pretty lazy. He just didn't like work. And his two older brothers, Tom and Will, they couldn't understand that too much, but they didn't like work either. But they at least got out and hustled up a little bit here and a little bit there. Jack, he just stayed home around Mama. And Mama told him one morning, said, Jack, you gotta get up and go get a job. He said, Mama, where am I gonna get a job? And his mama said, well, first you think, what can you do? He said, I can't do nothing. His mama said, I know that, Jack, but there's got to be something that interests you that you can make a little money at. So she talked Jack into it, fixed him a little sack lunch, and he went off down the road, heading towards the settlement. And he'd stop everywhere he seen a business. You need anybody to help you work? And they'd say, what can you do? And he said, nothing. Well, we don't need nothing done today. So down the road he went. He come to this big pasture field, and it had white cattle in it. He was thinking, boy, that's what I'm going to have one of these days, a big farm with white cattle. And he looked up on the hill, and here was this huge, huge house. One day I'm going to have a house like that, Jack said. So right down the road he went, and he stopped everywhere. You need anybody to help you work? Well, what can you do? Nothing. Well, he doesn't get a job, and he started thinking, you know, maybe I am answering wrong. So he stopped at this farmer's house, and he asked this farmer, do you have any work that I can do? And the farmer said, well, what can you do? And Jack said, everything. He said, you can do everything. He said, yeah, I can do everything. Just whatever you need done. And the farmer said, well, come on to work with me. Well, that day, they were raking leaves off from about a 3-acre yard. And they was raking leaves, and the farmer was talking to Jack. Jack, did you see that big, beautiful house on the hill? I sure did, and one day I'm going to have a house just like that. And the farmer said, well, if you work hard enough, you might do it. But you know, the king lives in that house. And there's something strange about that house. That king has a daughter, and she has never laughed. She has never even cracked a smile. And that king has proclaimed that anybody that could make his daughter laugh, they could marry her, and he would give them all the gold that they could carry. And Jack said, boy, that would be all right, but I ain't interested in girls right now. Well, that day when they got through working, the farmer said, here, Jack, here's you a quarter. And Jack said, you mean I don't have to wait till Friday to get paid? He said, oh no, I pay every day. Here's you a quarter. Well, Jack was so happy, buddy, he's going down the road, he's flipping that quarter up. He's flipping it up here and catching it, and he's flipping it and catching it. And he was almost home when he got to the creek. And he got up on the foot log, and he started across the foot log. He's flipping that quarter. flash, it was gone. He went on home. His mama said, "Did you get a job?" He said, "Oh yes, I got a job." Said, "I made a quarter." She said, "Well, that's good. Let me see it." He said, I dropped it." She said, "Where did you drop it? Didn't you pick it up?" He said, "No, ma'am. I dropped it in the creek." "How did you drop your quarter in the creek, Jack?" "I was flipping it up and there it went in the creek." She said, "Now, Jack, I'm going to tell you something. Tomorrow when you go to work, if the farmer gives you a quarter, whatever he gives you, put it in your pocket and don't take it out." He said, "Yes, ma'am." Put it in my pocket. Well, the next day he went back to the farmer's house. "You got some work for me today?" The farmer said, "I sure do." Said, "We're stacking wood." "Come on, Jack." Jack worked hard all day stacking wood. And then they went out to the barn and they milked the cows. Oh man. And when they got through milking, Jack was standing there with his hand out. He was wanting another quarter. But the farmer, he didn't give him a quarter. He gave him a gallon of milk to take home to his mama. And Jack started down the road and he happened to think, you know, whatever, my mama told me, whatever this farmer gave me to put it in my pocket. So he pulled his pocket out and he started pouring that milk in there, and he'd pour a little while, it filled up, and then it'd go down and he'd pour it. He finally got that whole gallon of milk right there in his pocket. Slosh, slosh, slosh. And he went home. His mama said, "Well, did you get paid?" He said, "Yes, ma'am. I got paid a gallon of milk." And his mama said, "Where is it, Jack?" He said, "You told me to put it in my pocket. I put it in my pocket, Mama." Now, Jack, he give you a gallon of milk. Listen, I'm going to tell you something now. When you go back to that farmer, and if he gives you money, you put it in your pocket. If he gives you anything else that you have to bring home and you can't get it in your pocket, you carry it real slow and you walk slow and come on home. Okay. Next day he went to work and he worked hard. And they were churning butter. And when they got through churning the butter and it's time for Jack to go home, the farmer's wife took some grape leaves and put them together and put a big round mold of butter in them. He said, "Now here, you can take this home to your mama and you can have butter with them biscuits in the morning." Okay. And here he's going home. And he's carrying it. And it started melting. And it kept melting and getting smaller and melting and getting smaller. And he tried to hold it up against him like this so that all wouldn't run away. And when he got home, his mama said, "Did you get paid?" He said, "Yes, ma'am. They gave me butter, and here it is." And she said, "I could take a biscuit and sop you." Jack, farmer gives you anything that's going to melt. You walk right by the creek. All you got to do is put it down in the creek and it'll harden up again and you can come on home. Okay, Mama, I'll do that. Well, the next day he went to work. After he got through working, the farmer gave him a little kitten. Oh, Jack loved that little kitten. And he's taking him home. He's holding him up here. And that little kitten went to sleep. And he started getting warm. And he started relaxing. And that little kitten started sliding out of Jack's hand. But he remembered, if it starts getting soft, put it in the creek. So he socked that kitten down in the creek, got him up. Here he went on down there, they socked him in there again, because he'd hold him up there, and that little kitten would start getting warm and purring, and then he'd go to sleep, and he'd just relax, and it was almost like he was sliding out of Jack's hand, and he'd run over and stick him in the coop again. Well, he got home, and that little kitten was about drowned. What did you do to this kitten, Jack? Mommy, you told me if it started getting soft, I thought it was going to melt, so I put it in the creek so it would harden up. Now, Jack, I don't know what I'm going to do with you, boys. Here, Jack, you take this string and you put it in your pocket, and if the farmer gives you anything that's got a neck on it, tie that string around his neck and bring it home. He said, yes, ma'am, I will. They went to work the next day, and when they got through working, the farmer gave him a big gallon jug of cider. He was going carrying it home. He stopped. He said, that jug got a neck. My mama told me to tie a string around it and lead it home. So he tied a string around that jug of cider, and off down the road he went. He's a-hitting rocks, and finally that jug of cider broke, and when he got home he didn't have nothing but a neck and a little ring. His mama said, Jack, I don't know what to do with you. Said, here. She got a pillowcase, and she folded it up, and she gave it to Jack, said, you take this, and anything that the farmer gives you, you put it in this pillowcase. Well, Jack said, okay. They worked really hard. And the farmer liked the way Jack worked. And when they got through working, he said, come here, Jack, I got something for you. Took him out the barn. There was a little donkey. Here, you can take this little donkey, and you can raise him, and he can carry all your wood, and you could probably even break him to plow. Oh, Jack just loved that little donkey. And he got that donkey and he started down the road and he stopped. Now, Mama told me anything that farmer give me, I'll put it in a pillowcase and carry it home. Well, he took that pillowcase and he put it over that donkey's head, and it didn't come down but just past his shoulder. And he took it off and he put it on the back of him, he pulled it up, it just come up to his middle. He picked that donkey up and got all 4 legs down in that sack, but it wouldn't go up over him. So what he did, he just took the front part of that donkey and put him up across his shoulders, and he put that bag, that pillowcase up on the back of him, and here he was going down the road, carrying that donkey, and that donkey was going, ee-haw, ee-haw. And they passed the king's house. And that daughter looked out the window. She seen Jack coming down through there with that donkey on his shoulders and that sack on one end, a-weaving and a-wobbling all over that road trying to get home, and she broke out laughing. And the king run out and seen Jack and run down and got him. He said, son, said, this is the first time my daughter has ever laughed, and she's still up there laughing. Said, I tell you, you have won yourself a wife and all the gold that you can carry. Shucks, Jack said, I'll take it. So he married the girl. He had all the gold he could carry. And Jack never did have to go look for a job of work again. Thank you. When I was a little kid, I grew up in a community of 9 houses and 56 kids. And there was a house come empty about a quarter of a mile from us, and the old farmer's house. And Dad come home one day, and I was just a little kid, about 6. He said, you know what? There's a family moved into that old farmer's house down there. And they must be 8 or 10 of them kids down there. Well, I wanted to go right then because I wanted to go down there and play with them kids. And I told my dad, Dad, take me down there and let me play with them kids. He said, I will. But he didn't. Well, he come home from work the next day and I said, Dad, take me down there and let me play with them kids at that old farmer's house. He said, I will, Charlie. But he didn't. He just went on about his business. Well, the next day, I was out there, and I knew where that old farmer's house was. And I waited, and I waited. I was waiting on my dad to come home, and it kept getting later and later and later. And finally, I knew if I was going to go down there and play, I had to go. So I just left. And I went down there to that old house. Sure enough, there was about 8 or 10 children down there. And they was out there playing, and I just jumped right in there with them. And I played with them all evening long. And we was playing this game, a Red Rover, and I looked up and it was starting, the sun was going down a little bit. And I told them kids, I said, you know what, I got to go home. They said, no, we're fixing to have us something to eat. And their mama come out there with biscuits and grape jelly, and we had biscuits and jelly, and we just jumped right in there. I forgot about going home then. We just started playing again. Well, next time I looked up, it was getting dark, and I knew I had to go home. Well, the road that we lived on, it was a dead-end road. It just went right around the bluff, and the farmer's house was here, and our house was here. And in my little 6-year-old mind, I decided, well, there ain't no use me going all the way around there. I'll just go right across the bluff, and I'll come out at the house. So the first path I seen, I took it. I was just up in them woods really good when it got dark, and I got lost. And I was wandering around up there, and I seen a light. Well, I just headed towards the light, and it was a little cabin. And I walked up, knocked on the door, and this old lady come to the door, and she said, what are you doing out here at this time of night, boy? I told her, I said, well, I was down there playing with them kids at that old farmer's house, and I started home, and I was going to take a shortcut, and I got lost. If you just show me which way to go, I'll go on home. She said, I'm not turning you loose here in these woods at night. Said, you come on in here. And I did, and she said, are you hungry? And I said, yes, ma'am. Well, she give me a biscuit and jelly sandwich, too. She said, what's your name? I said, Charles Headrick. She said, are you Lois and Olaf's boy? I said, yes, ma'am. I didn't know her from anyone. She said, well, you're going to spend the night here, and I'll take you home in the morning. I didn't want to spend the night in that house. And I was in there sitting on that little old settee, and she's over there sewing, and she had the oil lamp going, and there was a door flew open. The biggest boy I ever seen in my life run out that door. And I'm telling you what, he was, whoo, he had lips. His lips were like 2 bananas. They were so big. And his fingers, they looked like cucumbers, they were so big. And he run right over to me and said, hey boy, hey boy, hey boy, hey come here, I'm gonna show you what I can do with these old big old lips here, these old fingers. Scared me to death. And that woman got up and run him in that room and closed the door, and I was shaking like a leaf. She said, now you come here. She said, you go in that room, there's a bed in there. You lock that door, and don't you come out till in the morning, and I'll holler at you. I said, yes, ma'am. I went in that room, I sat down on that bed, and I wasn't about to get in that bed. I kept looking out the window, because I could see that oil lamp, the light out that window on the ground. And I kept watching. Finally, that old lamp went out. And I waited, it seemed like an hour. And then I got a hold of that door, and I unlocked it, and I picked up on it and opened it real easy so it wouldn't make any noise. And I was slipping out towards that front door, and I was almost to that front door when that door flew open, and here come that big old boy. Hey boy, hey boy, hey boy. I just fell down in the corner and put my hands up like this. He said, now I got you. I'm going to show you what I can do with these big old lips and these big old bony fingers. And I was just like this. He said, look at me, boy. And I looked up at him, he said,
there?